In this video, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at some of the recent news around Fallout 76. A good chunk of what we're going to talk about comes from this article, which at first glance probably looks pretty short. And well, yeah, it is pretty short, but it actually contains a lot of information that's pretty much going to tell us what's going on with the game for the next month or so. And even if you already read the article, I have some additional details that I could use to fill in some of those blanks. Outside of that, there's also a recent interview that has been making the rounds I did want to talk about at least a little bit in this video. But either way, if you guys do enjoy or just want to keep up to date with Fallout 76, you can leave a like or subscribe. And actually towards the end of this video, I have a little announcement involving the next update coming to Fallout 76 as it pertains to this channel. So looking at this most recent Inside the Vault article, basically highlights all of the major things happening in July and just over the next few weeks around this game. So firstly, we actually get an official release date for patch 11, what is shaping up to be a fairly considerable patch. If you missed my past video last week, they actually shared more explicit details as to what's going to be in the patch. You can click in the eye if you want to check out that video, but basically it seems like heavily focused on quality of life features, not necessarily new content, but perhaps more of a bug fixing patch and actually just improving the quality of the existing content. It's going to be coming out on Tuesday, July 16th, which is pretty normal. That's when Bethesda tends to release patches for Fallout 76. And even though we do have more DLC on the way, I would be shocked if we actually see it drop with this patch. There's no indications that anything big is coming, and maybe there will be a couple of surprises, a couple of new features just thrown in. I'm actually kind of hopeful we see some new stuff around the nuclear winter game mode, or maybe even just add in a couple of new weapons to the game overall, since it really benefits both modes. But what is far more interesting, and also announced in the same article, is actually a new seasonal event coming to Fallout 76. This game so far has had one seasonal event. Many of you probably remember the Fosnot Parade. This was actually the second DLC update ever to come to the game, and it was a really cool one. Very community driven and just all around got people playing together, which was something that we didn't have a ton of before that update. Naturally, it only lasted for a week, but this time we're getting something a bit different. It's described how at the end of this month we're getting a new seasonal event that's going to be focused around Grom. If you're not familiar with Grom, he's the roaming super mutant trader you could find in Fallout 76. And the way to describe it, it seems like it's really going to boil down to just putting on a barbecue. They describe how you're going to have to help Grom actually get all of the various ingredients to put on this party, but after doing so, you will be handsomely rewarded if this party is a success. So I would say this is actually pretty interesting because we don't know a ton about what's going on with this event. A lot of the major DLC in Fallout 76 is actually added to the game and then set live at a later date. So for a really long time, I was talking about data mines or leaks from Bethesda because a lot of the content is added in with a previous update, but then they figuratively just flip the switch with a later one. With this event, that's not the case. It seems like it's going to be something totally new and unique that we haven't really seen or heard about before. Now, as far as what you're actually going to be doing here, this is pure speculation on my part, but likely you'll be killing a bunch of animals to later be cooked and eaten, maybe gathering other party supplies. It's likely that'll be in a fairly similar vein to what we saw with Fosnot, where it was relatively mundane or minor tasks. Perhaps with this one, they'll actually up the difficulty a bit, since Grom tends to be a higher level trader. But really, the appeal, at least of the first event, wasn't about the difficulty, it was about actually connecting with the community and getting some rare, unique rewards. Some of which were immensely rare, having a drop rate under 1%. Hopefully Bethesda introduces a new kind of cool reward, maybe some kind of hats that would be very summer themed, or sunglasses or something along those lines, which again is interesting because unlike with the Fosnot Parade, nothing has been data mined that I've seen that could really fill in that gap. Although I imagine following this next patch 11, we'll have a pretty good idea of what's going on with the event, as again, a lot of that stuff will probably be added, and I will talk about that in my video when that comes. So yeah, we didn't get a 4th of July event, but hey, we're getting a July barbecue event, which hopefully could be just as good. But then what I view as one of the most substantial announcements out of this is actually QuakeCon 2019, and rather how Fallout 76 is going to be at QuakeCon 2019. So QuakeCon goes from July 25th to July 28th, that being a Thursday to a Sunday. Obviously, it's very focused around Quake and those games, but Bethesda always has a fairly large presence there, and last year, this is actually where we got this gameplay clip for Fallout 76. But the part about this that got me interested is they actually describe how they're actually going to have a panel at QuakeCon for Fallout 76 to discuss the plans for the rest of the year and beyond, and that we can expect to learn specifics on Wastelanders, Nuclear Winter, the upcoming vaults, and even more than that. And it also seems like this panel will have a fan Q&A, again, kind of similar to what they've done in the past, so they do request that you ask them questions on some of their major social pages. So from this event, there's a few announcements that I would expect to be pretty substantial. First and foremost, I imagine we get some form of summer roadmap for the Nuclear Winter DLC wave. Nuclear Winter is the game mode, but also the name of the broader second DLC wave for Fallout 76. The only real indication we got as far as release dates for some of these things are the vault raids coming late this summer, with summer technically ending on September 21st, so it still could be a ways away and likely is. But even outside of that, there really is a big question around the scope of this second DLC wave. It seems like the new game mode was really meant to be a major part of it. That obviously took a lot of work and a lot of manpower. But as far as other stuff, we don't know a ton. Is there going to be some kind of new quest line introduced? There's been no indication of that thus far, but it seems like something that probably would be fairly likely, or something Bethesda would want to do. And even some of those other features and their release dates, like the legendary player system, the vault raids, and anything else that's getting added. So yeah, QuakeCon will probably learn a lot more about where Fallout 76 is going in the next 2 to 3 months, but seemingly also in the future. There's obviously a lot of unanswered questions around Wastelanders. I don't know exactly what they'll be discussing at this event, but hearing something around a release date would be really exciting, or even a bit more clarity on the actual scope of this DLC. They keep referring to it as massive and game-changing, but I wonder if this is more just in how much it's actually going to impact the game, since it is so fundamentally different, or if it's actually going to be a very lengthy DLC, having hours upon hours of new quests and content. But what I'm actually the most excited for is how they actually talk about other things, and how maybe they'll even discuss beyond just this year. One of the big lingering questions around Fallout 76 is mod support and private servers. Something that was promised, but we still haven't heard a ton about. This is really the first instance we've seen Bethesda even mention discussing things coming outside of just Wastelanders, or even beyond Wastelanders. So I'm pretty curious to see what they talk about, if they even mention what kind of DLC we could expect from 2020, at least broadly. Well, either way, it seems like QuakeCon 2019 is going to be a big event for Fallout 76 and contain a lot of really interesting information. Naturally, I will be covering all of it, so if you want to subscribe, you could expect a lot of videos around whatever we learn. I'll probably handle it pretty similarly to my E3 coverage, but also they mentioned how there's going to be a panel at this event. It'll likely be live streamed, and all the donations will be going to the 1UP charity for cancer. So like I said before, a relatively short article in length, but it actually has a lot of substantial announcements around Fallout 76 and its future. A lot of interesting and exciting stuff's coming on the way, and it seems like towards the latter part of July, we're really going to be jumping back into that Fallout 76 news cycle, where there is actually new happenings around the game, not just periodic mentions here and there. The other thing I did want to talk about is actually a headline that has been getting passed around. That is, No Man's Sky's Sean Murray explains why it's best for Anthem and Fallout 76 developers to stay silent after launch. If you're not familiar with Sean Murray, basically he launched No Man's Sky a few years ago. It was a complete disaster. The game was feature incomplete, and a lot of promises were just kind of broken or unfulfilled. It was one of the first major kind of highly anticipated games that released and was just horrible. And naturally following that, a lot of people drew comparisons to Sea of Thieves, Anthem, and Fallout 76. But basically with No Man's Sky, there was next to no communication following release. The team basically hunkered down, started updating the game, and then roughly 2 years later, it really had a big resurgence with the release of No Man's Sky Next, and what was once just a giant meme of a game that people hated kind of slowly turned into a fairly respected game that people were enjoying. So a lot of people draw comparisons to it when referencing some of these other failed launches. At a recent panel, he actually describes and gives advice to some of these other games, saying how we went 2 years without talking to press at all, and we went about 3 months without ever saying anything to the community either. That was really hard. I sat down so many times and wrote the perfect blog post that was going to explain everything about the game's development and the roadmap going ahead, but I could see that it didn't hold credibility with regards to where we were at. So obviously an interesting approach, but even outside of that, he expands on it by saying that some of these other games should do this. There have been a number of games that have since come out, had a polarizing launch, and had explosive mix of loads of people playing it, but also problems. And I could see EA, Microsoft, or Bethesda trying to placate players by just talking to them, but right or wrong, it just doesn't really work. You can see this all the time when a big publisher will talk to the community and try to solve the problem, and then get embroiled, taking up more and more of its headspace. And I don't know, I wanted to really cover this because I could see a lot of people people just reading the headline and not actually finding out what he says, and I think a lot of people did do that. But at the same time, I find this to be an interesting perspective, and I'd love to hear what your guys' opinions on this are. Let's say with Fallout 76, Bethesda didn't communicate, which initially they were fairly silent, but over time, the communication was a major component. Just this past week, we have the Inside the Vault article. This entire series of articles is a byproduct of requests for bigger communication at launch, mostly due to the launch problems. And for me at least, I really question whether this advice would apply to Fallout 76. I don't think no communication would be the right answer as much as accurate or genuine communication. Yeah, sure, sometimes giving people the rough news that, hey, this bug isn't going to be patched for a couple of weeks because that's as fast as we can get to it, will piss off a subsection of your community, but at the same time, I think informing the community, allowing them to accurately consume the product and know what's going on with it, will almost always be the best course of action. I think Fallout 76 would be a much lesser regarded game if Bethesda wasn't communicating as well as they have been, but at the same time, I do understand the argument of talking less and just getting more done, fixing the game, and slowly people will turn rather than trying to convince them to turn. Convince them with the work, not with your words. I don't know, either way it's an interesting one. I'd love to know in the comments down below how you guys feel about it. And as far as my kind of announcement around Fallout 76's update, it's coming this Tuesday. This Tuesday I'm going to be elsewhere on something secret that I can't talk about yet, but that you'll be excited to hear about in a future video. For that reason, I'm not actually going to have my video out covering the update until the following Thursday. Just a forewarning, because I know a lot of you guys do come to this channel looking for those update videos. I still will be doing one, it'll just be a couple of days later, going over some of the nitty-gritty of that update. But otherwise, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. As always, again, I thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. But with that, I hope to see you all next time. Later.